Hey guys, Dr. Bodle here. And you want to know something that really drives me nuts? And I should also say, it is not your fault, but I'll be going over some recommendations or strategies with a patient. And after sharing that with them, they'll say, wait a second, isn't that bad for Hashimoto's? And also, in a similar way, you might come across this same kind of phenomenon where you'll be doing some research, trying to find some different avenues that you can use to support your symptoms and improve your Hashimoto's. And once you finally find something that sounds really good, sounds like it might be a nice option for you, the very second you decide to implement it, you find another resource that tells you that particular strategy is not a good idea. The point is, we've all heard a lot about what is good and what is bad for Hashimoto's. And sometimes all these different opinions can be so overwhelming that we end up not knowing what to do and we become paralyzed by indecision. Well, as we know, if we want to change how we feel, then we need to change what we're doing. And having too much of that paralysis by analysis doesn't do anyone any good. Now, I do want to say that I believe, or at least I hope, that if someone is sharing some sort of strategy, it's because they believe in it. Or more likely, it's something that they did and it worked for them. And whenever we have a personal experience with something, it can make us that much more passionate about sharing it with others in the hope that it'll help them too. My point is, I don't think people are being intentionally contrarian or intentionally difficult, but I do think they're missing an important piece of the larger picture. Remember, even though we can have two different people with the same diagnosis of Hashimoto's, that doesn't mean that the underlying causes or their underlying physiology is working in the same way. Because of this, the strategies that we want to use and the way that we support that individual is going to look different depending on the context and depending on the situation. So even though one of my most favorite things is to see people having success, and if that particular strategy really worked for them, that's amazing. But at the same time, we want to understand that that strategy isn't going to work for everyone. Like I said, context is everything, and we need to make sure that our strategies fit with those underlying changes in our physiology. So today, let's talk about three areas where I often see people confused because someone told them that that particular strategy is something that is bad for Hashimoto's. Number one, fasting. Now, the people who are against fasting say that people with Hashimoto's need to make sure to nourish themselves, avoid depriving themselves, and fasting is just another extension of a harmful diet culture that takes things to the extreme and has you completely depriving yourself of calories. On the other hand, you have certain people promoting fasting as the secret health hack that you've been missing and is the key to improving your metabolism. So which is it? Well, of course, the point of this video is to show that both have some truth to it. But again, it comes down to what you need as an individual. Fasting is going to be good for some people, and it's going to be not so good for others. But there can be some general guidelines that we can use to determine whether it's something that you should trial. Generally speaking, if you're someone who is more overweight, demonstrates elevations in blood glucose, hemoglobin A1C, triglycerides, or insulin on their blood labs, and tends to feel tired or drowsy after you eat, then it's more likely that fasting could be a good option for you. On the flip side, if you're someone with Hashimoto's who is underweight, highly active, older, and also notices that you will get symptoms if you go too long without eating, things like feeling lightheaded, developing headaches, feeling anxious or irritable, and having nausea, all of these could be signs that fasting might not be the best option for you at this time. If you're someone who falls into the first category, I think doing something like a 16-hour fast and an 8-hour eating window on a regular basis would be totally reasonable, while also understanding that those numbers aren't magic and you can flex them to meet your needs. You could also consider doing a 24-hour fast on a weekly or every other week basis, but I generally wouldn't recommend doing more than that until you really become comfortable with how your body responds to fasting And I don't always find that those longer duration fasts provide a lot of additional benefit. I'm not saying it doesn't, but for most people, I don't find that it's something we need to invest a lot of our time and effort into. For the people who aren't fasting, I still think it's helpful to keep at least a 10 to 12-hour gap between your dinner and your breakfast. But once you do eat, it's okay to eat more regularly as long as you can minimize some of those symptoms that we discussed and you can keep things like your energy feeling more stable for you. As always, check back in with your symptoms and your function. And if fasting helps you to reduce those symptoms, then that could be a great strategy for you. But if it makes those symptoms worse, don't feel badly about eating more frequently because one is not better than the other. We always just want to focus on what helps you to feel your best. Our second area of confusion is exercise. Many people recommend that for people with autoimmune conditions, you should be doing lower impact and less strenuous exercise. You'll see things like yoga, stretching, Pilates, or walking. Although most people don't include my most favorite low impact exercise, which is swimming. It takes a ton of pressure off your joints and soft tissue because water reduces that impact of gravity and you don't have the pounding that you would with maybe walking or jogging. Plus, it's really easy to ratchet up or ratchet down the intensity. So again, I think swimming is a great option, but apparently the rest of the internet doesn't think so. But no matter what I think, the point is lower and slower is better. And if we want to see results, then we have to keep things chill. But not so fast, says our opposing group. If you do all that slow stuff, you're never going to get anywhere. And you actually need to push your body, do things that have high intensity to them, and focus on things like strength training. Without that kind of robust stimulus, your body is never going to change, and you'll forever be stuck in your slow moving ways. Once again, let's ignore what we're passionate about and what we think is right, and instead look at how these different types of exercise actually affects the way our body works. Exercise is a stress on our body, both physically and metabolically. It's a good stress, but it's still a stress. And we need to be aware of that, especially when we have some other forms of stress, something like an autoimmune condition, that are also impacting how we're functioning. If someone is dealing with a lot of inflammation because of their Hashimoto's, then they might not be able to tolerate a huge increase in the stress on their system. And that's why when we look at these different approaches to exercise, the thing that is most important to us is tolerance for the individual. What this means is, if you were to engage in any sort of activity, and after that activity, you notice things like you were feeling extremely fatigued and you needed to sleep, you were having generalized pain throughout your body, and in parts of your body that were not involved in the specific activity or exercise. Potentially, you noticed an increase in some of the symptoms that you deal with from your thyroid on a daily basis. And finally, it's possible that it could take you days or weeks to finally recover from that initial activity. Again, if your body's already stressed, then it can only take so much more stress before it starts to break down. So, do we want to push our body with exercise? Yes. Do we want to engage in things that are different and challenging to us? Absolutely. But we can't do those things if they're beyond our capacity to tolerate it and recover from it. This is why, for some of my patients over the years, I've had them do something super simple like walk to the end of their driveway and back. It's short, it's easy to quantify, and if we feel like we're doing too much, we're already at home. But while that might sound ridiculous to some, it could be very appropriate for someone else. On the other hand, I might have someone who is a lot more capable and able to engage in exercise. And it wouldn't be unreasonable for them to do a high intensity class or do some weight training. These things are going to apply more stress to our body. And that's okay if we tolerate it. So with anything, what you want to do is start low and slow, find your tolerance, and work from there. We don't want to be doing the same thing in perpetuity because that's not going to challenge us. But as we build that base and as we start to feel better, we can push ourselves a little bit more and continue to receive the benefits that exercise provides. So pick something that you enjoy doing, adjust the frequency, duration, and intensity based on how you feel afterwards, and recognize that there is no one magic exercise that's going to deliver optimal results for everybody. One last note here. I've said in other videos before where I've talked about exercise that sometimes I have people completely cut out exercise in the beginning of their care plan. Now, again, this might sound crazy, but sometimes we have to focus on other aspects of their health first, support their immune system, get their inflammation to be better managed. And once we do that, it becomes much easier for us to engage in exercise when in the beginning, their system might be so sensitive that it's very difficult for them to tolerate it. Now, before I get to my final point, I did want to say that if these are things that you've been struggling with and you want to learn how to better understand what your body needs and how you can deliver different types of natural strategies, that way you can improve things like your energy, improve your symptoms, and really feel like you're taking back control again, then I would highly recommend getting in contact with me about my online course, Natural Hashimoto's Transformation. In the course, I've distilled 10 years of research and clinical experience with patients into 8 modules that focuses on the most important things we need to help improve our Hashimoto's. Everything is laid out in a clear, step-by-step, common sense way. That way you know you can follow it appropriately and you can receive the changes and improvements that you deserve. In addition to the modules, you get lifetime access to weekly live question and answer sessions. That way, not only do you have the learning on demand, but you also have me there to help you every step of the way. So if that sounds like it might be a good fit for you, email me at contact@seattlethyroidhelp.com and we can find a time to hop on a Zoom call and discuss all the details. And with that said, back to our final point. So the third area that people get confused with, and probably the part of Hashimoto's where we find the most things that are referred to as good or bad, is of course our nutrition and what foods are potentially inflammatory for Hashimoto's. I mean, I'm sure you guys see it all the time. Eat meat, don't eat meat. Eat eggs, don't eat eggs. Legumes are good, legumes are bad. Have nuts and seeds, avoid them at all costs. Nightshades are inflammatory, never have dairy. Obviously, we could go on and on, but all that confusion and contradiction really doesn't help us very much. Instead, the way that I think is helpful to think about it is not that certain foods are good or bad, rather that all foods exist on a spectrum, and there's certain foods that have a higher likelihood of causing a problem for us. So when someone recommends that you remove a particular food, really it's not because they think it's bad. Instead, we're removing it to test how your body responds, and that removal is just done out of an abundance of caution. The more symptoms that you have with eating, and remember, those symptoms don't always have to be gut related, things like bloating and changes in bowel movements, could be headaches, could be fatigue, could be weight gain, all of those are possibilities. And if you seem to be reacting to a larger number of foods, then the more likely it is that you could benefit from a more strict or more stringent diet. On one end of our nutritional changes, I might recommend to someone for them to eat a whole foods diet, where they're obviously eating whole foods and avoiding things that are processed and packaged in a box or a bag. On the other end, we might be doing something like an autoimmune paleo diet, where we're not only removing common triggers like gluten, dairy, and soy, but we also remove potential less common triggers, things like gluten-free grains, eggs, nightshades, and nuts and seeds. Now, a lot of people are going to find themselves somewhere in between the two. And what you want to be able to do is find the approach that allows you to feel your best, but also provide you with as much flexibility as possible. Over time, that flexibility can increase, and that's another good sign of healing. But some people will notice that if they keep things a little bit more focused and a little bit more targeted, they continue to feel well, and increasing that diversity of choice isn't necessarily something that helps them. So this is why you see so many different opinions when it comes to Hashimoto's and food. Different strokes for different folks. And certainly, if you've made some dietary changes and you're still continuing to struggle with some of your symptoms, then it would be reasonable to look at doing some further refinement. But just like we said with exercise, There isn't going to be one perfect approach that fits everybody. So be open to making adjustments and changes as you need, and recognize that your nutritional approach will likely evolve over time as the needs and demands of your body changes. But as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. What sort of things have you been told were either good or bad, but then when you experienced it for yourself, it wasn't what you had been told before? Leave me a message down in the comments and we can keep the discussion going. As I said already, if you're looking for more help and you want to work with me, make sure to send me an email at contact@seattlethyroidhelp.com to get more information about my course, or you can follow me on social media for daily information, tips, and strategies. That's all we have time for today. I love you guys. I hope you're taking care of yourself. If you do have any questions or need help, make sure to reach out. And if you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for new content every Thursday. But my name is Dr. Bodle. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I will see you in the next one.